Hi, welcome to ACCQ Continuing Professional Education. Pag-usapan naman natin ngayon ang isa sa pinakamahabang topic sa financial accounting at isa sa madalas itanong rin especially sa board exam, no? Ito yung tinatawag na lease accounting. Now, mahaba kasi may dalawang parte nito. Meron tayong yung lease accounting para dun sa lessee, at least puro lease, no? Para dun sa lessee, at meron tayong lease accounting para dun sa lessor, on the part of the lessor. So alam naman natin dun sa lease, no, this is another term for the word rent. So ito yung pag-uusapan natin maya-maya. Based on the definition, a lease is a contract or a part of a contract that conveys the right to use the underlying asset for a period of time in exchange for a consideration. Whew! Medyo nosebleed yung definition pa lang, no? Pero ang ibig sabihin lang nito is that pag sinabing lease, ito yung parang renta rin to. Renta. Another term for lease is rent, no? So, may mga takeaways dun sa definition na yun, no? So, may kontrata raw. So, pagka may contract, of course, merong contracting parties. May lessor at saka merong lessee. So, yung lessor, ito yung nagpapaupa. Yung lessee naman, siya naman yung umuupa. Now, another thing is that yung underlying asset, yung pag sinabing underlying asset, ito yung the right to use yung underlying asset, no? So meron yung lessee, yung umuupa, meron siyang right to use yung and enjoy yung asset na yon, no? So the underlying asset could either be a machine, an equipment, no? A warehouse, no? So ito yung underlying asset for a consideration. So of course, pagka pinahiram sa iyo or pagka pinarent sa iyo yan ng lessor, babayaran mo yung the right to use, no? So, ito yung pag-uusapan natin. Pag-uusapan naman natin yung finance lease model para dun sa lessee or yung muupa. Under PFRS 16 paragraph 22 provides that at the commencement date, yung umpisa ng lease period, no, the lessee should recognize the right to use asset and a lease liability. So, ang ibig sabihin lang nito, initially, mag-recognize ka agad yung lessee or yung umuupa ng account title na right to use asset. No? Because of the right to use that underlying asset over the lease term. And yung lease liability, doon naman sa payments na gagawin niya. Now, wala na tayong tinatawag na mga operating lease, no? So, finance lease na. Kasi usually medyo may katagalan to. Now, meron lang exemptions. IFRS 16 paragraph 5 provides that a lessee may make an accounting policy election to apply the operating lease and not recognize an asset or a liability now under two cases, no? So number one is that if the lease term is short o kung maiksi lang yung term ng lease, no? The next one is that it is of low value, yung asset is of low value. So kung mababa lang naman yung value, so pwede ng operating lease yun. So if the lessee chooses to apply yung operating lease, then lahat ng mga yung payment niya doon sa right to use the asset is considered as rent expense. So ito yung dinedebit natin as rent expense. So a finance lease is defined as a lease that transfers substantially all the risk and rewards incidental to ownership of an underlying asset. So para siyang bumibili ng ng asset niya, no? At the commencement date, doon pa lang raw sa umpisa, the lessee shall recognize a right of use asset and lease liability. So ito yung account title na gagamitin. Now, for the initial measurement of the right of use of asset, so a right of use asset is defined as an asset that represents the right of a lessee to use an underlying asset over the lease term, no, in a finance lease. So this comprises yung cost, the cost of the right to use the asset comprises the present value of the lease payments, the lease payments made to lessor such as yung lease bonus, lease less napapag-interchange ko tuloy yung lease saka less any lease incentive received, initial direct cost, so kasama ito dun sa ika-capitalize natin to as part of the yung sa lease liability, and estimate of cost of dismantling, so yung yung pag-disassemble and restoring the underlying asset for which the lessee has a present obligation. So lahat ito kasama ito dun sa cost nung right of use asset. So pagdating naman dun sa presentation sa financial statement, itong account na to na right of use of asset, so the lessee shall present the account, the right of use asset, as a separate line item, no, so under non-current asset. No, incidentally, yung yung leasehold improvements, hindi kasama yun dun sa direct cost. Another thing is that pagka finance lease ito, ibig sabihin, merong asset, of course, merong depreciation yan. Now, under the depreciation of the right of use of asset, so IFRS 16 paragraph 32 provides that the lessee shall depreciate the right of use asset over the useful life of the underlying asset. So under the following conditions, no? So letter A, the lease transfers ownership of the underlying asset to the lessee at the end of lease term. So ita-transfer, so may chance na mapapunta o mapasa kanya dun sa lessee yung underlying asset. And yung pangalawa naman, the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise a purchase option. So may purchase option siya, no? So ito yung dalawa na to na meron siyang chance na makuha yung ownership nung yung inuupahan niyang property. Now, if there is no transfer of ownership to the lessee, or if the purchase option is not reasonably certain to be exercised, the lessee shall depreciate the right of use of asset over the shorter between the useful life of the asset and the lease term. Paano naman kung walang purchase option or hindi ita-transfer sa kanya yung underlying asset or yung asset at the end of the lease term? So, pagka ganun yung situation, ibig sabihin hindi mapupunta sa kanya yung asset, no, at the end of the lease term. So, pwede niyang i-depreciate yun at the shorter between yung useful life ng asset or yung lease term, no, whichever is shorter dun sa dalawa na yun. So mamaya papakita natin example. Meantime, ito naman yung measurement of lease liability. So the lessee shall measure the lease liability at the present value of lease payments. So the lease payments shall be discounted, no, using the interest rate implicit in the lease desired by the lessor. So gagamitin natin yung effective interest rate, no? So if the implicit ibig sabihin kasama na, if the implicit interest rate cannot be readily determined, the incremental borrowing rate of the lessee is used. So these are the components of the lease payments. So number one is yung fixed lease payments or periodic rental, variable lease payments, exercise price of the purchase option if the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise the option, the amount expected to be payable by the lessee under a residual value guarantee, and termination penalties if the lease term reflects the exercise of a termination option. So papakita natin yung ano niyan, yung components mamaya ng lease payments, no, in our example. So meantime, yung mga executory costs, no, such as yung ownership expenses, such as maintenance, taxes, and insurance, no. So ito i-expense naman natin sila when incurred. Okay, so let's take this example, no, para makita natin kung paano yung application nito, no. Okay, so on January 1, 2020, I hope you can see it. No, adjust natin ng konti. Yeah, now 2020, Nadine Company entered, puro na tayo lease kanina, so Nadine naman. Nadine Company entered into a lease for a new warehouse. So ito raw yung ano, so warehouse yung underlying asset. Lease payments are 800,000 a year. And so for 5 years. So mamaya i-take into account natin yan. Yan lang at present value, no? So payable in advance starting January 1, 2020. So at the commencement of the lease term, no? Which is January 1, 2020 rin. The warehouse has an estimated life of 10 years. Let's take this into consideration. The entity paid initial direct cost of 100,000. So kasama ito dun sa ano, sa cost, total cost nung ano nung lease liability. So 100,000 on January 1, 2020. The realty taxes of 40,000 a year are to be paid by the entity. So ito namang realty taxes na yan, expense natin yan immediately. So at the end of the year. The lease provides for neither a transfer of title to the lessee upon expiration of the lease term nor purchase option. So wala yung ano na yon, yung bang transfer of title or lease option, no? So the underlying asset is reverted to the lessor. So mapupunta rin dun sa lessor, no, at the expiration date of the lease term. So the interest rate implicit in the lease is 10%. The relevant present value factors are, so gagamitin natin to, present value of an ordinary annuity of 1 at 10% for 5 periods is 3.79, and present value of annuity of 1 in advance at 10% for 5 periods 4.17. Now ito yung gagamitin natin kasi binayaran siya at the beginning of the period, so 4.17. Okay, so requirement here is journal entries. Okay, journal entries for 2020 and 2021. So umpisa muna natin dito sa 2020. Medyo ibaba natin ganyan. So get your calculators ready, no? Magko-compute tayo mamaya. Or get your cell phones ready. So this is 2020. Yeah, 2020. Yan. So i-ano natin. Bigyan natin ng ano. So yung nung January 1, okay? So January 1, so meron siyang magi-recognize na tayo dito ng lease liability. Okay, so saka ng asset. So right to use asset, okay, for debit. So paano yung pag-compute niyan? This is 800,000, okay, times 4.17. Yan. So kunin na lang natin yan. So magkano yung lalabas? So medyo magko-compute tayo ngayon, ha? Kailangan ko ng calculator ko. Okay. So, ayan. So, ang lalabas ay saka yung salamin ko. Okay, so 3 million. This would be 3,336,000. Ayan. And then, yung lease liability. So, mag-recognize din tayo ng lease liability. Okay. For 3 million, the same. So, this is debit. And this is credit. Okay, for 3 million. 336,000. Ayan. So, kita mo, kinonvert natin into present value nung yung right to use kasi 800,000 taon-taon yung binabayaran niya for the next 5 years. No, so kinuha natin yung total asset niyan by using the present value of annuity of 1 in advance kasi ngayong January 1 dun rin mismo at the commencement of the lease. So that would be 3,336,000. And then of course noong January 1 also, okay, January 1 rin siya, meron siyang binayaran na the entity paid direct cost, if you can see it, to 100,000, this one. So ganun rin, so ika-capitalize, isasama natin siya dun sa asset account na right to use asset, okay, for 100,000. So lagyan natin 100,000. Yan. And of course cash kasi binayaran naman niya yon, cash na. So these are direct cost, okay, which are capitalizable dun sa asset. Okay, and then yung pangalawa naman, so lagyan natin end statement. So lagyan natin yan, 1 rin, January 1 rin, no? Okay, so this would also be a ito naman yung nagbayad na rin siya kasi nakalagay dito, no? Okay, lease payments are 800,000 a year for 5 years payable in advance starting January 1. So binayaran niya this one. If you, yan, taas natin ang konti. Itong 800,000 na to, yan, binayaran rin niya noong start rin ng lease term noong January 1, 2020. Okay, so bali natin siya. We will record this by a debit to lease liability. Okay, so binawasan natin yung liability, ayun yun, naka-credit siya, so dinebit natin ngayon dito, no? At least yung 800,000, yung portion lang na binayaran niya in advance. Okay, kasi may kasama dito na 800,000. And then debit, credit, cash. So binawasan natin yung cash since binayaran natin for 800,000. Okay. And then ano pa ba? So magdi-depreciate tayo, no? Di-depreciate natin yung asset. So this one is December 31. Okay, 2020. So i-depreciate natin yung asset, no? Okay? So kasi this is a finance lease. So depreciation lalagay natin. Depreciation expense. Okay, so how do you compute that? So i-add mo lang ito, yung total asset na 3,336,000. This one, okay, 3,336,000 plus yung direct cost na 100K. Okay, so that would be 3,436,000 divided by yung the shorter between the lease term and the useful life of the asset. Now, yung lease term, since kasi wala naman siyang purchase option tsaka hindi mapupunta sa kanya yung asset, so kukunin na lang natin pag depreciate natin, no, doon na lang sa the shorter between the lease term and the life of the asset. Now, ano ba yung lease term niyan? I think it's 10 years. No, pero yung yung estimated life pala ng warehouse is 10 years, pero yung lease term is only for 5 years. Ayun. This one, no, if you can see this, no, this one for 5 years. Okay, 5 years. Okay, did you see this one? Yan, 5 years, no. So, di-divide natin yan by 5 years, so the shorter between that. So 5 years. Okay. So nevertheless, this is a finance lease. So, magkano lalabas? So, this would be 687,000. 687,200 debit. And of course, credit accumulated depreciation, yung contra asset account niya. accumulated depreciation, okay, of 687,200. Ayan. So that is the Now, meron pa ba tayong nakakaligtaan bukod diyan? Meron pa, di ba? Okay, now magko-compute tayo ng interest. Okay, kasi utang ito utang natin ito for 5 years, no? So magko-compute tayo, no, base dun sa remaining balance, no? Okay, now as you can see in the table, we have here yung accrued interest, yung payment table, no, yung ano niya, no. So meron diyan yung, as you can see here, yung year, the payment, the 10%, the interest, principal, and present value. Now the present value, as you can see on the table, no, meron 3,336,000. Ito yung dinebit natin, no, during the commencement of the lease, no? Okay, so that's 3,336,000. So dito lang tayo magbabase ng interest, no? And then yung payment niya, doon rin sa advance payment of 800,000. So natin sa principal, lalagay natin sa principal, no? So wala pa tayong interest nun, and then saka natin ibabawas doon sa 3,336,000 para makuha yung pinaka present value niya, no, para ma-compute natin yung interest expense. So, yung pinaka-present value niya after deducting the principal of 800,000 from 3,336,000 is 2,536,000. So, i-multiply mo lang by 10% yon, no? Multiply lang natin by 10% and we will get yung depreciation na 200, o yung interest expense na 253,600. So lalagay natin dito again sa December 31 our last entry. Okay, so this would be interest expense. This is 253,600. 253,600, and accrued interest. And accrued interest payable. Interest payable. For how much? This is for 253,600. Ayan. Okay. So, meron pa ba tayo bukod dyan? May nakakaligtaan pa tayo? Parang meron pa, kasi meron tayong babayaran na tax, no? Kaya lang hindi na kasya dito. So, na lang natin, no? I-record na lang natin yung tax, no? As a debit to tax, no? Debit to tax by 40,000 and credit to cash for 40,000. Okay, so if you have any questions regarding this particular topic, no, you may write down your comment, no. Saka yung may mga gusto magpa-shoutout, no. Okay, so yeah, you just write down your comment, and of course subscribe, share, and like. Okay, so God bless, stay safe, and keep your hands clean.